In this video, I'm going to talk about what it means to be triggered and what that has to do with your unhealed childhood wounds. Most of us know what it means at this point when we're triggered. We could be minding our own business, having a perfectly fine time, and then suddenly out of nowhere something happens and we feel like we need to run for our lives because of the terror that we feel in our body. We might feel extremely angry and feel like we need to fight for our life. We might be hit with a wave of grief and sadness that we have no idea where it came from. And I understand how unwanted and unfun these triggering experiences can be. Believe me, as a cycle breaker in the making myself, I still don't enjoy when that happens, but I do know what it means and I do know what to do about it. And so that's what I'd like to teach you about today. Anytime that you are triggered, you've lost your peace. Something has just happened, either an interaction with a person, getting a piece of mail, seeing something in a social media post, can provoke an emotional reaction as a form of emotional flashback. Something has reminded you of a time that you were wounded, and it may be a time before you had verbal memory, and so you don't actually have any idea what the trigger is related to. But the first step is to really understand that any kind of unwanted overreaction to something is a sign there's some trauma coming to the surface that's ready to be healed. And when we can approach our triggers with this level of acceptance and understanding, we can use unwanted experiences as catalysts for growth. I will share a simple story from my own life about this. There was an experience a few years ago when my husband and I took a plane trip to North Carolina. This was a very big deal for me because of my chronic health issues and history of unresolved trauma. Traveling was kind of scary for me. I didn't know if I would have the right kind of food to eat that was accessible to me because of a lot of food issues related to digestion. I didn't know if I would have the energy and the stamina to handle a flight and rental car and get to the beach and all of that. So I had a little trepidation about going, but I was also very committed and I was working really hard to be in charge of my mindset so that I wouldn't go into fear. And what I noticed when I arrived in North Carolina was that my body hurt from head to toe. When I got off the plane, I was pretty miserable. All of my muscles had constricted, flares up of pain and burning sensations in my body. That is not how I wanted to start my vacation. But I realized pretty quickly that the cause of this flare up of body symptoms was related to something going on with my inner child. And so I had this very brief, impactful conversation with little Mindy. I said to her, with regards to how I was feeling in my body, I said, "What's wrong?" And I just talked to her like the most loving mother I could muster up. And I wanted to understand what was bothering her. And the message that I got, this subtle, quiet voice, said to me, "I did not like being on that plane. I felt trapped." And immediately I realized what this trigger was related to. I felt trapped the whole time I grew up in my family. I did not want to be in my home. I did not want the parents I had, the sibling I had. I felt trapped and I wanted to escape, but I couldn't. And so that created a wounding for many of my inner child parts that would get really reactive anytime I was in a situation where I couldn't escape or leave. And so that came up during the trip on the airplane. And the thing is, that wasn't a problem, even though I didn't feel good and I didn't want to have that pain in my body. It did create a healing opportunity. And so by talking to my inner child, I could listen and validate how she felt. I could ask her to elaborate and I could listen as long as she wanted me to, for her to express how much she didn't like that feeling of being trapped. And then I gave her a tour of my life. I showed her how old I was, how old she had become, that she had grown into me. I showed her the lovely, wonderful husband that I have, my experience as a mother with my 2 young adult daughters, my business, my home. I showed her all of the ways that we made it. And even though it was a very bumpy journey to get here, I helped her to see that she was no longer trapped. I was no longer trapped. And that really satisfied her. And I had a great trip. And on the way back home, I had no issues on the flight because I addressed the core wounding associated with what caused the trigger, which in my case was a flare up of pain. So this was easy for me to do because I've done inner child healing with myself for many years. But I want you to know how simple it can be. It's very helpful to have a practitioner to teach you how to do this, but maybe even just hearing my story can inspire you when you are triggered, whether it's through body symptoms or a strong emotional reaction to something. Get curious with your own little inner child and just say what's wrong, and be open to give lots of compassion and validation, and really seek to understand what specific wound there is that needs to be healed. And this is a way to gain self-empowerment instead of feeling at the mercy of experiences in our life that are not fun. We can know that we have the power within ourselves to transform any discomfort into something more powerful. I hope this was helpful.